Podcast Evolved, your home for Halo.
Welcome, Spartans, to Podcast Evolved, your home for Halo. I'm your host, Aaron, and with me today we've got Oren.
Hey, everybody.
This week's show is another lore episode. We are bringing you more of the Road to Infinite. This is going to be part 2 of our 2557 to Infinite episode. It was too big to do in one lump, so we've had to split it into 2. We will be tackling 2559 to 2560, which at the start I didn't think we'd have too much to actually fill this, but it turns out it's a pretty decent chunk of lore.
Yeah, quite a lot happens, yeah.
Before we get stuck into that, I will do some socials. So, if you're new to the show, this is Podcast Evolved. We host a variety of shows. This is our main one. We report news, lore, things like that. We also have Halo Headlines, which is bite-sized headlines every week, Builds with Blocks, Halo Book Club, and Mission Debrief, who are currently doing their 20 for 20 series on YouTube, so go and check that out, please. The guys have worked hard on it. They will be back for Halo Infinite next year, so look forward to that as well. Also, shout out to our partners over at HCS Pro Talk. Josh and Will are over there bringing you all the information on Halo esports, which will be kicking off soon for Infinite. We discussed that, I think, the last time we did the news, didn't we? That's coming up soon, isn't it, Oren?
Yes, the HCS for Infinite returns in December, like a whopping 10 days after release. So it should be very, very exciting to see how the pro players get their first experience with Halo Infinite.
And if you play anything like me, it will be your first chance to find out how good people are just 10 days in, and that you'll never be that good, so. You'll be able to find me on the Discord being sad about that. Right. If you want to learn more about all of our shows, go and visit our website. That is halopodcastevolve.com. If you're already a fan, please take a moment to go and leave us a review and a rating on your podcast service of choice. We greatly appreciate it. Also, I want to take a quick minute to thank all of our patrons. You guys continue to give us money and help us do cool shit. We are currently plotting cool things to do with your money for later this year, because something important may be happening in the next few months.
Can't wait to learn what that's all about.
Once again, thank you guys. We really do appreciate it. Every time we get a new email saying we have a new patron, I get excited still, so thank you very much. If you would like to sign up and become a Patreon, you can go to patreon.com/Halo Podcast Evolved. You can find the list of all our exclusive rewards. We've got access to early episodes, unique swag, access to our soundtrack, the special patron-only Discord channel. Lots of things you can go and do. Oren, you're going to take us over our recap from part 1.
Right, so I think it was you and me that did part 1, and it was a lengthy episode, pretty dense. A lot happened in the 2 years of 2557 and 2558. So we covered basically those 2 years in part 1, and that was episode 18 of our Road to Infinite. We started with the events of Halo 4, where Master Chief and Cortana discovered the SHIELD World Requiem, and eventually stopped the Didact from composing Earth, also linking up with Infinity, with Captain Del Rio and Lieutenant Lasky. Then we talked about Ryan and her band of scavengers as they search for artifacts throughout the galaxy and reignited an old construct 343 Guilty Spark. Kind of talked about their journey that pretty much happens within that time frame. And we covered other novels like Envoy, Bad Blood, Legacy, and Onyx. They're all kind of their own individual stories, but towards the end have ties into Halo 5. Envoy, not so much, but Bad Blood and Legacy of Onyx have Guardian events, and so we kind of talked about how those stories all kind of synced up. And then we closed the episode with Fireteam Osiris and Blue Team as they discovered Cortana as she activates the Forerunner Guardians and declares martial law across the galaxy. That took place in October of 2558. A few events happened here and there between then and the end of that year, which we kind of mostly glanced over. The only one that we really wanted to touch on that ties right into January of 2559 is that in November 25th, the Banish started arriving to Installation 00, the Ark, and started their occupation over there. And so they went to the Henry Lab Research Center, and any survivors that fled just kind of ran into the wilderness and other UNSC facilities. And that's kind of where we pick up in 2559, where these survivors found a transport route set up by the Banish to move mining resources. And these survivors rests and argues while they are concerning which direction they should head next. Nathan Palmer records himself and the other 8 survivors in the group. This eventually leads to these audio logs that are then found by the Spirit of Fire when they arrive to the Ark. But also in the end of January, from the what's it called? These Fire Team Apollo
the crates.
bits. What are they? The crates. Yes, the loot crates that came with the figurines and all that loot box did. They touched on some interviews that Fire Team Apollo did of Sarah Palmer and Catherine Halsey to kind of get perspective and investigate the root cause of why Cortana made the decisions that she did, and kind of where we are in the galaxy, as Infinity is kind of light speed, slip space, jumping from area to area to avoid Cortana's reach. In February, we have the Mjolnir Power Assault Armor Gen 3. That armor enters service and then is later adopted by Master Chief. March is the big year of the Spirit of Fire. So on March 28th, after 28 years of drifting in space, the UNSC Spirit of Fire finds its way into the orbit of the Ark. Awakening from cryosleep, the crew eventually travels down to the Ark to establish contact with the galaxy. However, on the surface, the Ark, they encounter the Banished leader Atriox as well as his forces.
It's a fantastic cutscene in that fight with Red Team. It sets Atriox up as a super menacing force, and about the only complaint I have about the entire thing is we never get an answer to who brought them to the Ark. Someday I will continue to burn the flame of mendicant bias until someone tells me no.
Well, we have a new game and a few more books coming out that are being focused on the Banished as well, so maybe those novels will provide us some insight. But yes, that does beg the question how they discovered it, but they are here and they caused some trouble for the Spirit of Fire, but they were able to kind of quickly launch a counterattack. They discovered the logistics smart AI Isabel and are able to compile a research report on Atriox for Captain James Cutter. And they're able to discern who he is and learn about the Banish and kind of find out what type of formidable foe that he is. Ellen Anders learns more about the Forerunners, thanks to Isabel, and wonders about the Librarian's plan for humanity, but focuses her attention on helping the crew against the Banished.
I look forward to Dr. Halsey Mark II coming into the universe in Infinite.
You think so?
She is the obvious replacement for Dr. Halsey when that sad day comes, and I like Anders. She's a good character.
Yeah, and she gets into the action a lot like Halsey does to a degree, especially like on Reach. Really plays it close to the chest.
Yeah, it's like having the benefit of a young Halsey with matured Spartans, which we don't, by the time we see Halsey in the game, she's like getting on in years and is not really there to shake it up with the enemies, but Anders is totally fit for that.
Anders also has 2 arms, which makes things easier.
That makes life much handier, yeah. Oh, handier. Hang on a minute. I'm going to go hang my head in shame at that one.
Oh, is that unintended? That was a pretty good one. We have Decimus, which is one of the, right-hand mans to... Right hands to Decimus. And he was killed by the UNSC. And immediately after his death, the Spirit of Fire is attacked by Enduring Conviction. But then Enduring Conviction is then destroyed by Jerome and Isabel as they force an Ark Aggressor Sentinel into attacking the ship. And then that's when we discover that a Halo ring is currently on the Ark's foundry, which is kind of the standard protocol. Whenever a Halo ring is destroyed, the Foundry cooks up another one. So this is Installation 09, which is a second replacement to Installation 04 because Master Chief blew up number 8 at the end of Halo 3. Just kind of giving you a little history lesson there. Ellen Anders and Installation 09 eventually leave Installation 00 through a slipspace portal in the hopes to getting the Sol system, but are instead intercepted by a Guardian before they arrive, but after they depart, which is kind of strange. I guess they didn't quite make it to the Sol system, but they left Installation 00, so I guess they're kind of lost in space somewhere still.
They'd have to be somewhere in the galaxy, I assume. I'm guessing Cortana just didn't have Guardians out as far as the Ark.
Yeah, but obviously the Guardian knew that is where the Ark portal would send a ring to.
I got the feeling the ring came up short because the ring was supposed to go back to near Reach, but she very much seems confused when the ring drops out of slipspace early, so I think the Guardian pulled it out of slipspace, but Cortana seems to have a way. Well, I assume the Forerunners had a way to track slipspace activity because, as we'll cover in one of the books later, when the portal on Reach is activated, the Banished get ready to jump ship because they know that activation will attract a Guardian. I'm assuming she was able to track the Halo on its way and intercept it somewhere. That's my fan theory anyway.
That's your headcanon, as I like to call it. So that's the events of like the main campaign of Halo Wars 2. Then getting into some of the DLC, May 1st, we have Squad Sunray 1-1 managed to halt the Banished's plans to use a Forerunner Despair class fighter to destroy the Spirit of Fire, and that was Operation Spearbreaker. And then a month later, Lieutenant Vorderus and of the Banished inadvertently releases the Flood from within the containment shield around High Charity. Vortis and his brother Pavium managed to reactivate the Sentinels, kill the Proto-Grain Mine, and contain the Flood back into the former Covenant city. That was the Awakening the Nightmare DLC. I very much enjoyed this DLC. Fighting as the Banished forces against the Flood was a great perspective. I'm very glad that 343 was able to kind of tie that in to the story there.
Yeah, and Voridus and Pavium are pretty sort of likable characters. Granted, Voridus is an idiot, but he's a likable idiot.
Yes. You want to take it from here?
I will go with this next one. So we have, it's an unknown date in July, so this is a Dokab caster. He receives a transmission from Escharum. He's ordered his legion, and they're the Keepers of the One Freedom, and two other legions. It's the Legion of the Corpse Moon and the Ravaged Tusks. They are sent to find a hidden slipspace portal on Reach. This brings us to Shadows of Reach, so this is the preamble to it.
Well, this is kind of the preamble to the story that follows Blue Team, but around this time as well that I just remembered that we didn't put in here was the short story Sacrifice, where the brutes of the Banished go to the Forerunner key ship, the Dreadnought, and they go and retrieve the Forerunner slipspace crystal, and there are like still Covenant Banished like on the ship after all these years, like protecting it, and that happens before the events of Shadows of Reach. So that's something that also takes place in like the summer, June or July. But that then becomes important because now the Banished have control, or rather possession, of the slipspace portal from way back in Halo First Strike.
I think there's no date with that story, which is probably why it didn't make it into the timeline. I think we covered it when we were doing the Leaders of the Banished episode because it comes up.
It just says a few months before the events of Shadows of Reach. So if it's a few months before October, since that's mainly when it takes place, I imagine it's around the June, July, summer time frame. Like with this transmission, this transmission in July kind of kicks off the story, at least from the Banished's point of view, of Shadows of Reach.
I figure it's after Awakening the Nightmare, because Awakening the Nightmare was them once again trying to acquire a slipspace capable ship to get back to the galaxy, and then when that fails, I assume the next thing was to find the Dreadnought and look for a way to power the portal generator. My guess is sometime after the 4th of June.
Yeah.
I said, this is the warm-up to it. They occupy Reach and they begin unsuccessfully looking for the slipspace portal, which, fun fact for later, turns out to be under Menakite Mountain, which is, if you may remember, where Castle Base was, and that is the mountain that the Covenant dug out when they were attempting to get Blue Team, and the spooky time travel slipspace crystal, which the shards were on the Dreadnought, so it all comes full circle again. Next up, we have September 19th. So this is Dr. Halsey modifies the 3rd gen Mjolnir Armor's software. So we get this from the trailer with the pilot adrift in the Pelican. When he boots up Master Chief's armor and you get the flashes of the data going down Chief's HUD, there were various things hidden in there. One of them is a sign off that Halsey made modifications to the software. I think it says it's anti-intrusion tech she's put into it, presumably to stop AIs hijacking the suit. So you see that, as well as I think they gave away Game Pass codes, didn't they?
Yes, there was another just screen of just numbers and letters that, if you typed in, ended up being Game Pass codes. Cool little Easter egg.
Yeah, it's always worth picking apart a Halo trailer because you never know what's hidden there. Even the stuff that looks like computer programming turns out to be Game Pass. Next up, we are into October now, so this is very much Shadows of Reach. So October 7th, Blue Team return to Reach for Operation Wolf. They have been sent to recover top secret assets from the remains of Castle Base for Dr. Halsey. That turns out to be cryogenically frozen brains and something in a mystery box, which we still don't know what that was. October 12th, Blue Team succeeds and they give the top secret assets over to Oni and Veronica. And Fred also gets a message from Veda Lopez and the Ferrets, because they pass each other on the way to the portal before Veda and the Ferrets go off to get ready for Divine Wind, which is the next novel we will bring up shortly. And she also slips a little note to Fred. And then we have also on October 12th, Castor and Eshram, they discover where the slipspace portal is. They would eventually activate it. This is where the transfer happens. Atriox comes back to the galaxy and does his walk of fame with his briefly mentioned lieutenants. And then Castor takes the last of the Keepers and he does a little mutiny and heads back to the Ark, and the Ferrets go with him. Presumably, Divine Wind is sometime in October. What do we have here? There's no specific date. This is, it's out on the 19th, but presumably October-ish. Oh, it is. It's October 2559. Because as we discussed before the show, they are now releasing books roughly at the time of year they are dated.
Or the month anyway.
So in October 2559, with the galaxy in the suffocating grip of a renegade artificial intelligence, another perilous threat has quietly emerged in the shadows. The Keepers of the One Freedom, a fanatical and merciless Covenant splinter group, has made its way beyond the borders of the galaxy to the ancient Forerunner installation known as the Ark. Led by an infamous brute named Castor, the Keepers intend to achieve what the Covenant in all its might failed to do: activate the Halos and take the last step on the path of the great journey into transcendence. But unknown to Castor and his new unexpected ally on the Ark, there are traitors to the cause in their midst, namely the Ferrets, composed of Office of Naval Intelligence operative Veda Lopez and her young team of Spartan 3s, who have been infiltrating the Keepers to lay the groundwork for Castor's assassination. But with Oni's field operations now splintered and cut off by the Guardian threat, Veda's original mission has suddenly and dramatically escalated in scope. There's simply no choice or fallback plan. Either the ferrets somehow stop the keepers or the galaxy faces an extinction level event. Going on to the next thing, so in November we presumably have the battle for Installation 07, and then by December we know that the UNSC lost the battle. So, as we were discussing there with things, what does this mean? We see from the trailer there are a lot of deceased UNSC assets adrift in space on that holographic display in the back of the Pelican with Chief and the pilot. A lot of them are marked as infinity symbols, so we assume they are escorts, maybe even drop teams, Pelicans, that sort of thing, but there seem to be a lot of people dead in space. It seems like something big has happened.
And I mean, you have to think, at the end of October, or by the middle of October, you have Chief on the Infinity with these assets. You have Atriox arriving to Reach, and you have Castor leaving Reach and going to the Ark. And then what we do know after that is that Chief's now just floating in space. We have all these tags. The Banished are already on the Installation 07, and we'll get to this in a little bit, but there are some other battles and stuff that happen in early 29 or 2559 or 2560. So there's a lot of moving pieces that start at point A and get to point C, and so to figure out what that move is between the two is what we think is going on in November. We need to get Atriox to Installation 07. We need to get Chief in the area as well so he can be adrift, and we need some type of large scale event to happen that causes this decimation.
There are a lot of things to theorize about, so I will try not to get too far into it, and we will shuffle on because we could be here all day, but we will hopefully get a few answers in a week, fingers crossed, and then we'll see where we go from there. But now we will go on into 2560. We've got January to April of 2560. So we have presumably the Banished initiate their occupation of the Halo. We've seen a few bits of concept art since then, so we know that they have ships in orbit. They can drop bases onto the Halo in a similar way to what we see in Halo Wars. It's kind of their version of it. Those big chunky square towers that we see in the trailer are Banished facilities on the surface, so that stuff's kind of cool. And then we presumably sometime during this period have the other Halo novel that we've is announced, which is Halo the Rubicon Protocol. This comes out on April 12th, so we'll presume going with 343's theme of books being released the same month they take place, we will assume this takes place around April. And we have a little bit of information to go on this. Oren, where did we get this stuff from? Is this cannon fodder?
So this is from... It's slightly tweaked to kind of read better on the podcast, but the large stroke information is from Cannon Fodder 116 Parallel Threads from our friend of the show, Jeff Easterling. And I think the April assumption is not too far off, because what I'm about to read kind of assumes that struggles have been going on for a little while now. And it reads, the UNSC forces were ambushed at Zeta Halo by the Banished, and during that time, the UNSC has been mounting a resistance on a shown fragment of the ring, desperately trying to hold out long enough for hope to arrive. In Halo, the Rubicon Protocol, you'll get a unique glimpse of humanity's struggle to survive amidst a growing Banished occupation that takes place in that period. Supposedly, players will be able to find scattered stories in Halo Infinite's open world areas that will tie into this book. And that last little sentence there about the tie-ins was taken from a source you read, Windows Central.
Yes, that was an article in Windows Central where they were talking about some more information Jeff had given, so I think that could have been possibly one of the live streams he was chatting on, and they've taken a few quotes from him. This has me also excited because I'm curious to see. We will get information from Infinite, but to get this story as well of what's been going on in the arc over the whole time should be cool. And the idea that we will get scattered stories for some of these characters, I like that characters we'll hear in audio logs potentially could be the lead characters of this novel.
I'm kind of getting like, it's going to sound a weird comparison, but like bear with me, but almost like a Battleborn type of a mindset where instead of you have these like teens trying to fight against the Covenant arriving to Meridian, but you have these, I guess, Spartan 4s or maybe Spartan 3s, and their efforts with other UNSC personnel as the Banished kind of come in on whatever section of the ring that they're on. And then it's of them, hunkering down, trying to find resources, trying to launch a attack or whatever, or counterattack or any sort of defensive maneuver. And yeah, there's got to be some type of documentation of this, and probably in the form of audio logs that then you as the player find in Halo Infinite that can tie into what happened during those few months before the campaign takes place, which is kind of the initial reaction to the Banish's occupation. So it's a lot of exciting things to kind of theorize about. It kind of helps also to give perspective on how large this ring is, and I guess how large the Banished forces are. If Chief's story can be contained on a certain section of the ring, but then meanwhile on another part of it, there's this whole other parallel event going on, and who knows, maybe these characters that are mounting this reaction or this resistance are able to hunker down enough to eventually gain enough power to do so. Or maybe Chief's story then ties into that side in like some DLC or something, to where now we have to reclaim that section of the ring. And by the way, here are some characters that you might have heard in other audiobooks or through this novel.
There's a couple of things jump out at me here. The first thing is, this kind of reads like, I wonder, was Chief present for the Battle of Installation 07? Because it doesn't read to me like this has got a Chief in it.
Oh, I doubt Chief is in this. And I think Chief is present at least on the naval side of the fight, because he's floating adrift in space around the ring. So maybe he's just on the Affinity doing evasive maneuvers or something, kind of similar to like First Strike or like Cairo Station type of a thing. And whatever happens, and now he's floating in space, but then rejoins the battle on the surface later in May, which we'll get to.
Yeah.
Chief's definitely present in the battle in the early months of 2560. But I agree that whatever characters that whoever we follow in the Rubicon Protocol, those characters I think will be largely separate from the cast of characters that we play and experience with in the game, to where it's probably just some of those hours and hours of audio logs that, they've kind of teased this already about, that we've kind of grown to accustom to from like Halo 5 and Halo Wars 2 and those types of Easter eggs.
I wonder, yeah, like we have already sort of assumed that the trailer we got with Chief and the Pelican at the start is the intro cinematic, because it very much seems like that has the look up, look down and all of that. So I wonder what the time period is between that and the demo campaign mission that we got, because it could make sense then that they are further apart than it seems.
There is that very brief moment we got, I think, in the most recent quote-unquote E3 trailer, where Chief like navigates through just space debris and then arrives on some other ship, whether that's a Banished ship or a UNSC ship. So there's probably some sort of intro mission that doesn't take place on the surface, that maybe he's retrieving a different sort of equipment for the Pelican, so the pilot can hook that up and that can allow him to then fly and re-enter the ring's atmosphere. So then we then get the campaign demo mission, which I think happens like within an hour or two at most of whatever opening sort of gameplay we get of the actual game.
I don't know, I wonder could it be longer, but I will give a shout out to a theory Tom has. He thinks that the intro mission and that light at the end when Chief jumps out the back of the Pelican could be the Banished scooping up the UNSC debris, which would make sense with the art that we've seen, which shows inside a Banished hangar full of UNSC and other debris, Pelicans, all sorts of things that look to have been stacked up and collected to be recycled into other equipment. That is his theory, that is what that is. That light, it's not a Guardian, it's the Pelican being scooped up by the Banished, and then you will be playing, which makes sense if you are Chief then, when he drifts through space and goes through what looks like that Banished portal onto a ship, that might be our opening mission. So
yeah, I just feel like you need like one and then a big maybe two missions before you actually get to the ring. If this is supposed to be a very open world Halo game, then I imagine they want to get you to the open world part very quickly. And space is not very open world because there's just like nothing in there.
Yeah, if they're aping the original Halo, it makes sense that your first mission will be an on-ship mission like the Pillar of Autumn, and then you will get down to the ring and do cool shit after that. So be curious to see what happens there. Also, we talked a little about the show. I will only rant about this a little bit, or talk about it. The Halo, the Rubicon Protocol, the Rubicon as a name gives me some small suspicions. So I said before the show that a brief look when you look up what the Rubicon is and why you might know that name is it is a stream in Italy, and in times of the Roman Empire, no general was allowed to cross the Rubicon with a standing army, as it was considered an act of treason. So I was theorizing you before the show, is the Rubicon Protocol a protocol in place if a UNSC asset commits treason against the UNSC? Could it be a hint that something has gone terribly wrong at the installation and maybe someone sided with the Banished and turned on the UNSC? Could be another reason why there seem to be so many casualties in space, if friendly forces suddenly turned on them.
Yeah, and that could have opened up an opportunity for the Banished to really deal massive damage that would allow them to get the upper hand if there's some type of treachery or self-sabotage in play.
It's just a theory to float out there, because it is not the first time we have seen UNSC assets go rogue. Silent Storm is the first time we see it. So we get the Prowlers and they go rogue and join the... So I could see something like that happening. Someone else maybe with allegiances to insurrectionists, maybe teaming up with the Banished, because we know they work with humans. So lots to think about there of what might be going on with this. And we know, like, if they pick a name, it's there for a reason.
Well, also remember the Rubicon was the name of the ship that went through the Arc portal at Voy to go and investigate the Arc after the events of Halo 3, which then get hijacked by Guilty Spark after his death and all that kind of stuff. So there's the name Rubicon has, I think, multiple meanings even within Halo already.
Be curious to get a hold of that book and see what we get. Right, there's the one final piece we have in the timeline now going forward. This is May 20th, and this is Chief and the Pelican pilot crash on Installation 07. This is the campaign demo that we saw a year ago that gave us... what do they call that damn brute? Greg?
Craig with a C.
That gave us Craig and our first look at Infinite Campaign, and then our delay. Blame everything on the demo. But this is the most up-to-date information we have currently as to what's happening in the Halo universe. So, like we were saying, it seems to be a little bit later, but you're thinking it's pretty close to the intro chronologically?
I think so. I feel like you need your Pillar of Autumn, your Cairo Station, your Dawn and Halo 4. Like, you need your intro space station mission. It's a pretty good staple of Halo. And then your second mission is your boots on the ground. You know, in CE it was Halo Installation 4. In Halo 2 it was Metropolis. In Halo 4 it was Requiem. So I feel like, you know, your first mission is going through either UNSC ship that's been obliterated and kind of broken down for parts, or if you're going off Tom's suggestion, maybe they get abducted by a banished tractor beam, and now you have to fight through the banished forces on this ship, and that can introduce the villains really nicely, and then it's a matter of escaping, to which they just free fall into the atmosphere, and then it leads into this campaign demo. Like, I feel like that's a good way to really introduce the conflict, get you guessing what the heck is going on, and then put you right into the open world for then you as the player to explore.
Now that you've said that, I think that makes perfect sense, that mission intro we saw is very much the equivalent of the Bumblebee crashing into the Halo. It's got that same energy, except not everyone dies because Master Chief wouldn't put on a seatbelt. Because we absolutely know that everyone in that Bumblebee died because he broke loose and hit them. They were all strapped in.
The only other counterpoint I would make to my own argument is if we get to the ring's surface like through another way, and we play around with the sandbox for a mission or 2 or 3, and then Chief and the pilot, you know, take off to go somewhere else, which then are shot down, and then it leads into the campaign demo. I mean, I could see kind of that going, but I think generally the first mission will be a space station, spaceship type of a mission, with the second one being on installation 07, starting to get, you know, your feet dirty in the banished muck.
I think you're onto a good idea here. I think that, like, when we looked at that demo and we tried to get a look at the map when they bring that up and stuff, the first area looks not terribly large, so it could maybe make sense that it's like a warm-up to the open world, and it's your first introduction to things, and you're seeing open ground and bases, and you're working your way up through those mechanics and stuff, and disabling the AA guns. Like, it basically would introduce you to everything you could be doing in the campaign going forward. So I think your idea makes pretty good sense, yeah. Okay, well, that's pretty much all the information we have then timeline-wise. So do you have any other thoughts then going into Infinite? Like, anything you're thinking of, theories, things you would like to see? Because the only other information we're going to get then next week will be Divine Wind, and I imagine that will add another small piece to the puzzle, but nothing too major. Anything else you've got cooking up there before we call it quits on this?
I think you've kind of summed it up. I think Divine Wind will give us, you know, 1 or 2 jigsaw pieces into the overarching story, kind of similar to what Shadows of Reach did. Maybe even not as much as Halo or Shadows of Reach did. But yeah, once that book comes out, it's basically just hunkering down until Infinite comes out.
Yeah, right. Well, I think that'll pretty much do us. There's not much else we can do now bar crazy theorizing. So if you're listening to this, like we said, you will be getting it just as Divine Wind drops. So you can go and grab Divine Wind on your service of choice, book, ebook, or audiobook, I presume, and you can get stuck into that and see what clues it gives us. And then keep an eye out for the book club, because that will be the next thing that we release. And then we will be in the countdown to launch day.
Pretty much.
All right, well, in that case, guys, I think we will wrap it up for today. Thank you for joining us. Like we said before, shout out to... Oh, hi, we have a special shout out here in the notes. It's the previously on Halo.com that Harispus has set up. I think we discussed that on the live news show, but go and check that out. It's a tremendous amount of work involved there, and well worth a look. Also, like we mentioned at the top of the show, you can find all of our episodes over on the website. That's halopodcastevolve.com. You can find the unique feeds for all of our episodes, or the big main feed if you want. If you want to listen to everything all in one place, it's on the website. Also, special shout out to our patrons. If you would like to become a patron, that's patreon.com/Halo Podcast Evolved. If you're signed up soon, you could be in a position to get the Christmas card. That's one of the many perks that will be coming later in the year, isn't it, Oren?
Yes, it is.
We do Christmas cards before I find out that we discussed that in the meeting or something and don't do it anymore.
No, we do it.
It's all with unique art as well. So go and do that as well, patreon.com/Halo Podcast Evolved. And finally, if you would like to leave us a voicemail on this episode or any other, we will read them on our live news show. It is 205 Evolved. That's 205-386-5833. If you want to give us your theories on what the Rubicon Protocol could be, or how Halo Infinite starts, do that and we can chat about them on the live news at the end of the month. And with that, I have been your host, Aaron, and until next time, Evolved.
Evolved.
Evolve.